Hey folks, this is Lee, the young adult librarian at the Upper Darby Township Library. I am here with this month's STEM Shenanigans program. We are going to be testing out some homemade parachutes, not on ourselves, on small objects, just to see like what different size makes. So testing sort of the play between like drag versus the weight of the bigger size. So we're gonna get to it in a minute. I'll show you my materials that I've got. What I've got is a big old trash bag. This is one of the like heavy duty trash bags that you would use for like yard work or construction or whatever. I got it at a hardware store. I have 4 bundles of 4 strings because I'm gonna do 4 different parachutes of different sizes. So I wanted 4 strings, 1 on each corner of each one. So I've got 16 pieces of string here bundled, and they're about 15 inches each string. I've got 4 washers of equal weight. So these are about like the weight of like 2 or 3 pennies put together. So if you don't have washers and you want to do this at home, grab like a couple of pennies and tape them together, and that's totally just as good, right? So I've got 4 of those, 1 for each one. I've got a pair of scissors so I can cut the trash bag. I've got a measuring tape so I can measure the trash bag. And I've got a stopwatch so that I can try to time the different falls. This is sort of extra / optional. If I weren't, filming this on my phone, I'd probably be using my phone. So feel free to use your phone if you have a phone that will do that. But that's why I've got that. So I'm gonna get right to it. Like I said, we're gonna be doing 4 different sizes today. Let's see. I've got some instructions here that give me some basic ideas of sizes. So this is measured in centimeters. They're saying like 20, 30, 40, and 50 centimeters. So what that equals out to, somebody wrapped this backwards. So I have to unroll it all the way to get to number 1. So that's like, and again, this is just sort of a guideline. If you want to do different sizes, go for it, I think. Just make sure that you have enough length and width on your trash bag. So that's, for me, this is going to be like 8, 12, 16, and 20 inches each square. So I'm going to get to measuring and cutting that so that we can tie some strings and tie some washers and see how it falls. So again, like this is pretty heavy duty. So that's definitely, I think, going to have a bit of an impact in terms of like, how the parachute is going to function, because I think that the weight, my hypothesis, is that the weight of the trash bag is going to be a factor, like literally the physical weight, not just like the thickness of it, but the like amount that it weighs, right, is going to have an effect on like whether it like it's gonna have to like open up before it falls, or it's just gonna like fall with the washer, I think. So we also might have to test out some sort of like strategies on how to release the parachute. Like, can I just drop it, or do I have to like toss it up? Do I have to like make sure that I'm doing it like straight up? How's that gonna work? I don't know. We're going to find out. But I think all those things are probably going to make a difference in the outcomes. So I'm just cutting a line down the side here. So I have a big piece of plastic. And then I'm going to cut along the seam at the bottom. So again, just making this like one big piece of plastic that I can work with. I didn't want to do this ahead of you guys because I didn't want to literally get ahead of you. So if anybody's doing this at home along with me, you can do it. All right. So now I need to measure. I don't want to lose my scissors. All right, so I'm going to start over here with the straightest line, and I'm going to measure, again, starting with 1. I'm going to measure like 8 inches, which is about 20 centimeters, and that's here. Okay, that's convenient. There's a seam here. So I'm gonna just like make a little snippy snip here. And again, like, I don't care how exact it is, right? I just want to make sure that like I have 4 different sizes that are sort of like, I don't know, an equal amount different from each other, right? All right, so I'm gonna make another little snip here. Hold that in my other hand. But I do want them to be like pretty square. I might actually use my pen to like make a dot sort of out here so that I know where I'm aiming for. So this is the seam here. All right, and yeah, this is where I'm going, right here. So I can sort of aim towards that and try to make a straight line. And that looks pretty square. All right, great. I'm just going to go up the seam, which was at my other 8-inch mark. And what I'm going to do actually, instead of just cutting the 4 squares first, I'm actually going to show you what I'm going to do with this one so that if you get ahead of me, then you know what you're doing. Man, this is a pretty small parachute. We will see how this goes. All right, so I'm going to tie like little knots pretty close to the ends of all of these corners. And then what I'm going to want to do is tie the string around that knot so that it has something like firm and like substantial to hang on to, so it doesn't just like slip off the edge of the like slippery plastic. So I'm just getting that as close to the edge as I can so that the parachute can be as big as possible. But you can sort of see it's like not quite an inch, like maybe 3/4 of an inch from the end. And that felt like as close as I could get it to the edge without it like falling apart. So I'm going to do the other edges, and then I'll show you. I'm just going to like tie the strings around there, and then I'll tie the washer in the middle with all the strings. And I'm just going to do 1 washer per parachute, and we'll see how that goes. And if that like, you know, I think it'll be heavy enough to make it. Certainly, it's going to be heavy enough. I'm not worried that I need like more than 1 washer. If I have time, if this goes like super fast, maybe I'll test out like 2 washers per and just sort of like untie and retie them, and see like how that does. But I mean, I guess it could be so light that some of the bigger parachutes like fall before the washer, but that seems really unlikely that the parachute is gonna like outweigh the washer. I think that like theoretically could be a thing that would happen with like bigger scale. Like if I was gonna make like a parachute with this whole trash bag, that might happen, I suppose. But I don't think that with these like smaller squares that's gonna happen. But that's why we're testing it out, right? We'll see. All right, so I've got my 4 knots. They're fairly equidistant, equal distances. All right, so that looks more like a parachute. Cool. All right, I'm going to use one of these bundles of string and untie it. And like I said, these are 4 strings that are each about 15 inches long. And I'm going to tie 1 to each corner, and then tie them in the middle with a washer. So just going to tie a knot around each of these knots. You can sort of see what I'm doing here. It didn't necessarily help, so I'm like tying it around like above the knot. And again, I'm gonna like try to keep it like the same length from the end of the string if possible, just so that it's like, you know, so that the washer's as close to right smack in the middle as I can get it. But I've got just like a sort of like square knot right there. I'll do the same thing with the other 3 corners. And this is just some like pretty basic string that I had around. I guess it's like embroidery thread, but it's not like super heavy duty. It's not like super light. It just like feels like it's like a little bit heavier than like if you grabbed like thread that you would like sew with, but it's not like super heavy duty by any means. All right, 2 more, and then we'll do the washer. And again, I think I'm gonna test this out before I make the others. I'm just doing this again so that if you get ahead of me in terms of like cutting stuff out, that you will know the whole process and can go ahead. Sometimes it takes me a little bit longer because I'm like talking about what I'm doing and whatnot, so I'll do this so that you can do it on your own. All right, so I've got that one almost done. All right, and one more. It's kind of like fiddly little things, but that's all right. All right, one more knot. Okay, great. All right, awesome. So I've got my 4 strings here. It looks kind of like a jellyfish at this point. All right, so I'm just gonna tie the washer down at the bottom of these, and just like put them all through there and tie a big knot around the washer. And then when I test it out, I'm going to stand on a chair. There's a chair behind me that I'll rotate the camera so you can see, to get just like a little bit better height, like more time for falling, to see how it really does. All right, so here is my first parachute. It is a little bit skewed to the side. I'm not going to worry about that unless it seems to really make a difference when we're testing it out. I can untie it and retie it if I need to, but here we go. There's one. So I'm going to cut 3 more parachutes and do the same thing. I'm going to keep going along this edge as long as I can. So my next one, that was 8 inches. My next one's going to be 12 inches. So here we go. All right, I do not have a convenient seam at the 12-inch mark, but that's okay. You can still just cut a little notch. That's good. And measure this out. And I'm just going to like cut up to here. Let's see. I'm going to just use my pen to like mark where this needs to go. Right here, and then I'm going to use my pen again to just like figure out where the middle point is that I need to aim for. sure that lines up. Yeah, cool. All right, great. Yeah, all right, awesome. So I'm gonna cut that real quick. Shouldn't take, this is like the easiest part is cutting, cutting the parachutes out, for sure. All right, there's my spot that I'm aiming for. All right. Here's my spot that I'm aiming for. Doing it a little bit wide, yeah. Tighten it up a little bit. Really glad that I thought to make like a mark at the far corner, or these would be a lot less square. Cutting in a straight line is like really not one of my strong suits. But here we are. All right, so that's, you know, not a perfect square, but close enough. Okay, so again, I'm just gonna make the little knots at the corners, and this is like, man, this one is so much easier to work with already. It's like just those like 4 inches on either side make a huge difference in terms of, I think, like how easy it is to work with as an object. So we'll see what effect it has on it as a parachute, but as a piece of plastic to work with is already better, sort of. All right, there we go. All right. And just like, feel like you have more room to like tie a knot and not mess up the surface area. All right, third knot. And fourth knot. And then that's that. Let's go closer to the edge here. All right, good deal. Cool. All right. I'll go ahead and do all the steps one at a time. Just for, I don't know, uniformity. Why not? So again, I'm just like tying my strings one around each corner, around the knot that I made at each corner. So it has something to hang on to. And these strings, like I said, are about 15 inches long. Seems like enough to like give it some play, and not like, I don't know, not like have the washer like right up underneath it. It just seems like it gives it enough space, but not too much space to like be productive or work right. I was worried that this trash bag material, the plastic, was going to be so heavy, but it like really, when you have just the little squares, it doesn't feel all that heavy. So I think it's like pretty like sturdy though, really. I think this is a good material for a parachute. Again, I'm not gonna like test it on myself or anything, but I think it's a good material for a parachute. That would be an interesting next step after this. Like after this test of like which size is best, will be like testing different materials, like this versus like a plastic takeout bag versus like a paper bag versus like, I don't know, what, a piece of paper maybe, or a baggie, like a sandwich bag or a gallon bag. See what's the best material, best not texture, but weight, consistency. I think this would be a top runner, but who knows? Maybe we'll do that next time. All right, I got one more string here. All right, so I've got my 4 strings here. I'm going to tie, again, the washer, second washer in the middle here. And now that I'm thinking about how the first washer is a little bit like skewed to the side, I wonder, I mean, again, this might not be something that you'll see on this type of scale. We'll see, like, because it's so small and we're not like, you know, I'm not dropping it from the roof, I'm dropping it from like right above my head. Dropped my washer. You know, so maybe it would need more height, more time to do this, but I'm wondering if the fact that it's skewed to the side is gonna affect like how it falls. Like, is it gonna fall diagonally? Is it gonna like go to the side at all? I guess we'll find out. All right, so I've just about got this one tied on there. And then we'll go for number 3. All right, so I've got this one tied on there. And this one is maybe also a little bit to the side, but maybe a little bit better. Maybe I'm getting better at this, maybe I'm not. All right, so next we're gonna do a 16-inch one, right? So go 16 inches is here. And 16 inches is here. And 16 inches is let's back a little bit. All right, 16 inches is here. Just like making my marks so I know what to aim for. And we'll cut this third one out and get this show on the road. All right, I'm gonna try to trim this a little teeny tiny bit. Maybe this is not a good angle. Let's turn it around. Just because this isn't a very straight edge. That last parachute had a pretty wonky side, but that's all right. So I'm just gonna try to like straighten it out the best I can here. All right. Good deal. All right. And then where was my mark over here? It's here. That's great. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, there's my mark. Great. Great. And here we go. All right, awesome. So, even bigger. Ta-da! All right, so again, we're just going to tie some knots at the corners, and then we'll tie our strings around the corners, and we'll tie our washer. Do this as quickly as we can, so that we can give them a test and see which one is best. And I guess, you know, what we mean by best is like taking the least or the longest amount of time to fall to the ground, right? That's what we mean by best parachute, is to create the most amount of drag for the object. In this case, these washers. All right, so I've got my 4 corners. Great. Great. And my string. Again, I've got my 4 roughly 15-inch strings. I'm going to tie here around one around each corner, so I can tie the washer in the middle. One. I like how sturdy these pieces of plastic / parachutes are, because it, like, I was worried, one of the things that I worried about, because again, I do not test these experiments before we do it together, so that I'm learning right along with you. One of the things that I was wondering / worrying about, I was like, oh, is it going to just like fold in on itself and not catch the air at all? But these are like, they're pretty sturdy, and so I think, you know, I was talking a minute ago about like what would be better, like a plastic like takeout bag versus this trash bag versus, you know, a paper bag versus things like that. I think that this is one of the things that makes this one a good material for this, is that it's like really holds its shape pretty well. Like, I think there's very little danger of it just collapsing in on itself. I could be wrong, we'll see. But I think that probably it's gonna hold its shape pretty well and catch the air pretty well. And that's gonna help it act like a parachute, which is cool, because that's what we want it to do. So again, this is my third square parachute that I'm cutting out. This one is, what did I say, 16 inches. My previous ones were 8 and 12 inches. And so I've got my 4 strings, and I'm going to tie another of my washers in the middle here. And it's interesting because the strings felt so long on the first square, but much less so on this one. And I think they'll be even less so on the last one, because the squares, like the strings are basically the same size as like a side, same length as each side of this square, basically. So, you know, definitely like draws it in more. Whereas the first one was just sort of like, yeah, it's just like hanging out in the middle there. No big deal. This one's like really like drawing it into its shape, which is cool. All right, let me just get this tied real quick. And we'll get on to our fourth one. Fourth and final. Trying to leave myself enough string to double knot it. Not so much string that I don't have any string left at the top. All right, cool, cool. So that's, that one looks like. And again, it's a good thing it's like pretty sturdy, because otherwise I think it really would collapse in on itself, but because the like strings definitely like bring it into the middle, but I think the fact that it's pretty sturdy is gonna work in its favor. So, all right, one more side, one more square, and we'll be in business here. All right. Stretch this out so I have enough room to work with here. Let me just make sure that I've got enough room on this side. I'm pretty sure I do. Yeah, 20 inches is here. Cool. So, I'm gonna make my first little cut here. All right. Other side, 20 inches. All right, make a mark up here. Try to get it on a straight line. There we go. Pretty good. All right. And then find that middle square, or middle of the square, the other side of the square. It's right there. All right, make sure that's a straight line. Good deal. All right, good, good. Okay, cool. All right, let's, that might not be a straight line. Let's make sure that's 20 inches on this side too. It might not be. Yeah, it is though. We're pretty close to. All right, good. All right, awesome. So, cut these. This. All right, one more. Great. So I've got that, my last square, and it is so much bigger than my first square. It's kind of remarkable. I mean, that makes sense. It's like a whole foot longer on each side, so of course it's bigger. But you know, before I did this, I like hadn't visualized really how vast the difference would be. So we really have like a pretty huge range of parachutes to test out here. So hopefully we will see some pretty noticeable results. But we'll find out together in just a minute. So I finished tying my knots in all four corners. I'm almost ready to go here. And it's so much easier to tie knots in a 20-inch square than in an 8-inch square. And let me tell you, if you are doing this at home, you are aware. All right, so there are my 4 knots. Now that is so much bigger. Just to compare, like, this is my 8-inch square. I mean, obviously it's not 8 inches like anymore because I tied knots and tied strings around it, but like, this started out as 8 inches and it's so much smaller than this one. It's kind of ridiculous, but that's what we're doing. So, all right, cool. My 4 strings, tie them around my 4 corners, and then we'll be ready to tie our last washer in place, and then we'll be ready to throw some pieces of plastic parachute up in the air and see what happens. So yeah, I think the thing that will be, the next thing that will be interesting is like how does like, not only how does the size make a difference, but like what about how you throw it? Like I'm gonna try like just like holding the, I guess I'll hold like the washer instead of the parachute, and like try just like dropping it versus like throwing it up in the air, and see what happens, right? Like, because what we want to make sure happens is that the parachute like stays open and stays above it, right? So we'll see what those different methods yield in terms of results. So I'm almost done here. Just 2 more strings. Come on. My fingers are like, I'm tired of this. Just have to do it 2 more times. All right, 1 more. Yeah, so there's so many variables. So we just have to like see what works and like make sure we test it out for each one, right? So that we're actually testing the same thing. All right. So even more so with this example, it's definitely like drawing the corners like into their shape, right? Like drawing it up into the shape of a parachute here instead of just like a flat piece of plastic. Here we go. I have never actually jumped out of anything, off of anything with a parachute. I have friends who went skydiving and I was like, no, I'm not gonna do that. So, I don't actually know how this compares to like the size of a parachute versus the size of a person, but we'll find out. All right, so I'm gonna put these things all on this other chair here, and then I'm gonna put them next to the chair that I'm gonna be standing on. And I'll move the camera around so that you can see me. And I'll grab my stopwatch and we'll give it a go. Let's turn you around. There's my other chair. All right, cool. So I'm gonna do the smallest one first and go work my way up. Let's see, I wanna make sure you're able to see what's happening best you can. I think you'll be able to see all the way to the floor. Oh God. First you're gonna see me fall off my chair. All right, actually I'm gonna tilt that up a little bit so that it's not cutting off my head. 1 second. Hello again. There we go, that's probably a little bit better. All right, so let's see what happens. So first, I'm gonna try just like holding the parachute above it and dropping. Yeah, I'm gonna hold the parachute like at my head height and drop it and see how fast it falls. Ready? Here we go. All right, so it hit the chair, so that was not ideal. I'm gonna do that again. And hold it out a little bit farther. But I think it took about a second to fall. Reset and hold it out. Hopefully past the chair. And here we go. Yeah, so like not quite a second, but almost a second. I'm gonna see what happens I'm gonna see what happens if I just hold the washer and drop the washer and see if that, so that was like 0.9, not 9/10 of a second, okay? So now I'm gonna drop, and I think that this is probably not gonna work because I think the washer is just gonna fall into the parachute and it's not gonna like flip itself over, which is what it would need to do, like a cat, basically. So I think this is not gonna work, but let's find out. Yeah, that definitely went a lot faster. That was like 0.6 of a second because the parachute did not, in fact, work very well. All right, noted. And then third thing I'm gonna do with this is I'm gonna throw the washer up in the air and see what happens. And then we'll move on to the next biggest one, the bigger one. All right, so holding onto the washer again and tossing it up into the air. Ready? Here we go. That was again about 9/10 of a second, but I think it was because there was, a couple of tenths going up into the air. So I think that holding the parachute, unsurprisingly, right, we're like holding it in the right shape and dropping it so the parachute definitely catches the air. Falls the slowest. So good to know. All right, moving on to that was our 8-inch. This is our 12-inch. All right. So I'll try it all three ways again, and we'll see what works best. Okay, so holding it around my head height, holding it with the parachute, and here we go. That was about a second. So it was a little bit slower, not a lot slower, but like 0.07 of a second slower. I'm gonna do it one more time just to verify that result. So again, holding it at about my head height, holding it with the parachute. Yeah, that was about like 0.95 of a second. And interestingly, it did go diagonally. I don't know if you guys saw that, but it definitely like flew that way. Because again, this one is sort of skewed, off center a little bit. So remember how I was like, oh, I wonder if that's gonna affect it. It does. So that's cool. Again, like not super surprising, right? Like we know that from people falling with parachutes or diving with parachutes, like they have their like hand things that they can make it go one way or the other. But it's cool to see it in action with something like as simple as a washer on a couple of strings, that it really does have that kind of effect. So I'm gonna now hold it with the washer and see what happens here. Pretty similar, definitely fell in like 6 or 0.7 of a second. Definitely faster than if it, when it's turned over. And interestingly, again, not surprisingly, but interestingly, like when I didn't show you this last time, but when I, drop it with the washer at the top, it definitely like falls like this. So the parachute is definitely not flipping over and doing its job. Again, not super surprising, but noteworthy nonetheless. And so, all right, last one I'm going to do here, then we'll move on to the bigger one, the next bigger one. I'm going to toss the washer up and see if the parachute is able to like right itself and go. So here we go. A little bit, yeah, it actually was a little bit. I'm going to do that again because it was a little over a second. It was like maybe 1 or 2 tenths over a second, but it's so hard to like get it exactly that I'm going to try it again just to see. But I do think that this time it was able to like turn itself over. I definitely like sort of saw the parachute catch and flip over, so that was cool. Try to untwist this a little bit. All right, so one more time. Again, I'm sort of holding it at head height and tossing it up a little bit. another thing that's happening because I'm like standing on a chair is it's sort of like catching the chair, so I'm trying not to factor that time in too much, but it makes it a little complicated, but here we go. Here we go. Yeah, so that was like a second and a third. It was like 1 3/10 of a second. So that definitely, again, like there's a little bit of travel uptime, but really like that, I don't think the travel uptime accounts for much of that extra time. That's so interesting. And maybe it's because it's like starting up a little bit higher, but yeah, that definitely worked well. All right, I'm gonna move this out of my way a bit. And we'll move on to our 16-inch parachute. So again, we'll start with dropping it from my head height using the parachute, just parachute on top. There you go. Wow, that took like a second and 4/10. That was like almost a second and a half. And it sort of like drifted that way. That was really cool to watch. I'm gonna do that again just because it was cool to see. Ready? Yeah, so that was again about a second and a half. And it drifted that way. A little bit less cool to see because I ran into the wall, but still pretty cool. All right, so now I am going to toss it or drop it with the washer up top and see if it's able to right itself. Again, the other one, the next smallest one was able to a little bit, but not a ton, so we'll see how this one does. Ready? You know what? It didn't right itself, but it still took a pretty long time to get down. Like it still took a second and a quarter, like 1.25 seconds, which is like pretty remarkable because that's slower than the best time of the smallest one. So like even upside down and like not catching the air in the way that it's supposed to, like with the right shape, it still is a more effective parachute than the smallest one. Which is pretty cool. So, all right, so I'm gonna do the toss up this time. Because again, this is like I said, this did not flip over at all. Like it's still shaped like a bowl, right? But it definitely like took a significantly longer period of time. Like even with the washer pressing down on it, it still felt slower than the slowest time of the smallest parachute. Which is pretty cool. So parachutes, bigger is better, at least so far. All right. So I'm going to toss this one up, see what we get. Tossing it from head height. That was like a second and 6/10. That was pretty awesome. I'm going to do that again, just to watch it because it was cool. With this, I don't know if I'm just sort of getting used to the motion a little bit better, but I feel like I gave it less of a toss. Maybe I was like less worried subconsciously of it like not working. But yeah, I like definitely gave it a little bit less of a toss than I have the previous two smaller ones, for what that's worth. In terms of like adding height and time that way. So we'll do this one more time and then we'll move on to our biggest one. So again, like even though it hit the wall, but it was still about a second and a half, a second and 6/10. So cool. All right, so we've got one more parachute. And then again, like there's so many other things you could test out. Like you could test out different types of bags, different types of substances to see what works best. But this will be our last experiment of today. And figuring out what is the best parachute for our little washer friends. All right, so I'm gonna drop this from head height, just straight up. So interestingly, So that was about a second and a half. So that, I didn't write it down, but I think that that wasn't significantly slower than the other one. I might have to test it out again. Might have to go back to the previous one. Maybe that was a second and 3/10. But yeah, that was actually not significantly slower like I thought it would be. I feel like all the rest of them have gotten like pretty significantly better, but that, I don't know, wasn't as significant a change as I thought it would be. Interesting. I wonder what that could be about. I wonder if it's partially, I wouldn't think that it would be about the weight of the parachute material, the plastic bag material, but what it might be, I wonder if it's a matter of the strings like pulling the corners in more. You see how this is happening? How it's like sort of, remember how I was talking earlier about how it's like, oh man, is it just gonna like pull itself in on itself, and maybe like not even act like a parachute, like maybe it won't even open up. I wonder if that's happening a little bit here, more than it was for the other ones that had more leeway with their strings, because these strings are shorter than the sides of this parachute. So I wonder what effect that has. Again, the strings are all the same size for all the parachutes, just for standardization, but I wonder, that would be another thing that you could test out, like what is the best length of string for the best parachute? Or is there like a good amount of string for each parachute size that makes it a more effective parachute? So many variations we could do here. All right, so I'm going to do this one more time just to see if that was a fluke. So yeah, again, I got about a second and a half on that. And it was like, did a pretty good job, but it like, yeah, it wasn't as amazing as I thought it would be. And maybe that's just like the limitations of falling from this height, but it did not float as majestically as I thought that it might, for what that's worth. All right, so we are going to, I'm going to do this guy where I drop it with just the washer, just drop it straight up and see what happens. And this is the one where we got about a second and a half last time, I think. So I got about a second and 2/10 this time. So I think it did less well than the previous parachute. Again, I think I might go back and do the other one once I'm done testing this one out to see like what my numbers are, if I'm just misremembering. But it seems like this parachute is sort of underperforming the previous one, which is interesting and not what I expected at all. Let me grab it and we'll do the toss, and then I'll go back and get the previous parachute and see if I'm just misremembering its performance, or if it really is the superior size for a parachute. All right, here we go. Oh, well, that didn't make it all the way to the floor because it sort of slid back this way, but it took about a minute and a third, a second and a third, 1.3 seconds to get to my chair. So about the same as it did the last time. I'll try it one more time to see if we can get a good reading on it. Ready? Here we go. Oh, interesting. So that was about a second and a half, 1.5 seconds. All right, so we got 1.5, 1.3, and 1.5 with that one, the 3 different tosses. So I'm going to try the 16-inch one again. That was the 20-inch that we just did. I'm going to go back and do the 16-inch because maybe I'm just misremembering how well it did. But let's find out. All right. So starting over with this guy. No, that definitely, so that was a second and 4/10 right there. So that was like basically the same amount of time as the bigger one. And definitely felt like I don't know, just like eyeballing it, felt like it was getting a better, like catching the air better, looked like it was doing a better job. It seems like maybe, like I said, either the parachute material on the biggest one is just like heavy, too heavy to work properly, or the strings are drawing it in so that it's not able to keep its shape the way this one is, because this really is able to keep a good shape. And I think that that's partially because of the strings, because the strings aren't longer than the sides. So let's drop it with the washer. There we go. Again, 1.2, so sort of just about the same. I think the bigger one was 1.3, but that's a pretty negligible difference. Probably about 1/10 of a second, maybe 1/10. And toss it. Here we go. Yeah, so like 1.6. So I think our winner here is our 16-inch parachute. I'm interested to see what y'all thought. Like, did you expect that? I didn't expect that. Which one did you think was going to be the winner? I thought the bigger one was going to be the winner. Yeah, so this was super fascinating for me. I hope it was super fascinating for you. I had a good time. Thank you for joining me again. I will be back on the 4th Thursday of next month, once again, for STEM Shenanigans. If you did this at home, let me know how it went, if you got the same results that I did. If you didn't do it at home and you'd like to, we still have kits available here at the Sellers Library in Upper Darby. Swing by and get one while supplies last. If you don't get to get a kit, very easy to make this at home. You just need a trash bag, some string, some washers or pennies or what have you, a pair of scissors and something to measure with, and a chair that you can safely stand on. This video will be available after I post it on our YouTube page. Let me know what you thought of the results, if you thought that that I would get the results that I did, because I certainly didn't think that I would. I want to know what you thought was going to happen. Thanks again. Have a great rest of your day.